Hi, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Atara, one of the co-founders of Natural Pregnancy and Birth. And today we have a special guest with us, Liz. She agreed to share with us her birth story. So Liz, if you would tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you. So, yeah, I had my baby in May of 2020. So, that was interesting because the pandemic had just kind of gotten into full swing. So, um, I I started planning my home birth right after I found out I was pregnant. I was already 5 months along and had to move from a studio apartment. So I started looking at changing providers. And that's when I stumbled into home birth as an option. But things didn't work out that way. So I ended up actually delivering at the hospital. But everybody turned out okay. And my baby's doing well. So here we are.
So there's a couple things that you mentioned. This was all in the midst of the pandemic that's still currently going on. And you also mentioned that you were 5 months along when you found out that you were expecting. That is very interesting. What led you to see your provider that day? Like what led you to that situation?
Yeah, I had always had irregular periods, didn't have a period for years, and had a few months prior stopped taking my birth control pills and um, wasn't being careful, but really didn't think that things worked anymore. So it was sort of like yeah, whatever happens. I don't think that's even in the cards because the guy I was with, well, we're married now. He was like, we should have a baby, and I said, well, yeah, okay, whatever. So we were kind of in that place of like, I don't think that could ever happen. um so then he actually said, like, I think maybe we should get a test. Like, I think maybe, I don't know, I had my hand like on your stomach and I felt something and I was like, what? Anyway, so we bought a test. It was Christmas Day. I took the test. It was positive, of course. I started crying and I made an appointment the next day. So when I went for the blood work that they asked for, they said, you need to come in right away because either you're really far along or there are multiples. And I was like, get out of town. So we went in. They did an ultrasound to see what they could find, and I was at 21 weeks. There was the baby. There was all the parts. So it was a really and that was like New Year's Eve, I think.
So basically, while you didn't know that you were expecting at the time, this was still like a little bit of self-discovery, like you discovered it on your own, but you confirmed it with the doctor. And so you and your partner together. But I find that so fascinating. And it just speaks to the just how wonderful the body is, like you didn't know that you were expecting, and yet you still were able to maintain like a healthy pregnancy and everything. So that's amazing. I have another question for you. One other point that you made, you said that you had planned for a home birth, but due to unforeseen circumstances you had a hospital birth. What was that like for you to end up giving birth in the hospital when you had planned differently?
Yeah. So, like, before I found out I was pregnant, I never knew that people did home births. So I just went to my regular my gynecologist. And when I moved is when I started looking into a different option. And once I found out about things like C-section rates and like not being sure what kind of interventions you would get, I found out, just all of that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, so anyway, I ended up going down the rabbit hole, finding an office that does midwives that do home births, and met with them. They were wonderful. I was like, this is great. This is perfect. I'm not going to do that whole like hospital thing. And then when it came time, I was prepared from working with the midwives to, that there might be a possibility during labor, if there's a complication, you would have to transfer. But I didn't really think about, like, before you even start having the baby, you might have to just do the whole thing in the hospital. So it was a week before I was due, and I had a virtual appointment with my midwife and checked my blood pressure. It was really, really high. And they said, you need to go in, we're going to call the doctor, and you're probably going to come home with your baby. So I was really scared and super disappointed and mad that I had spent this money on a home birth. I wasn't going to be able to do it. But I mean, fortunately, the team that I had at the hospital was really great, and I was able to have my partner there with me. So, kind of once I was able to just accept that, what was going on, I started to get excited again. Then, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna see my baby now, and I'm gonna come home with my baby. Like, I just kind of had to go through all those really difficult emotions first.
Right. Right. Totally understandable. Totally normal in a situation where you end up having to do something that you weren't planning to do. A question about, you said that you were in the care of your midwives, you had a virtual appointment. Did your midwives accompany you to the hospital, like during your birth, or were you just in that situation? Were you then transferred into the care of just the OBs?
I didn't go with my midwives. They handled like contacting the doctor, because that's who they partner with at that hospital. So then they called me back and said, yes, we talked to the doctor, you need to go in. So I was like never really under the care of the midwives for the birth at all, just the doctor there, the OB.
Right. So you had this situation where you were relationship building with these midwives, and then I guess part of, I don't want to speak for you, but part of the acceptance was also being transferred into care of people you hadn't really become familiar with.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I had met with, in the office I worked with, the midwives there for the home birth were really great at preparing you for everything. And they did actually require that you meet with their partnering physician before you were so far along. So I had met with this OB one time and was comfortable with her and felt like, well, if things go south, I'm glad it's her and not somebody else. I felt good about her. So thankfully, I kind of knew at least, I could put a face to a name, when I got there, but it was all new nurses, of course, and everything like that. So, yeah.
Right. My next question is, what was your postpartum recovery and care like? And what kind of support did you have, especially in the middle of the pandemic? I know that especially, in 2020, that was the time when there was very contact and all of that was very minimal. So what was that postpartum recovery and care like for you?
It was really hard. And I think it always is, but for me, once I got out of the hospital, like I was on like iron for the blood pressure issue I'd had, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I had a tear while I was, delivering, and they didn't actually give me stitches because it was small enough, thankfully. But that hurt like crazy, and I couldn't sit, and I thought my tailbone was broken, but I don't think it was. I think it was just bruised. And there was like those kinds of pains, and then just the regular pain. It was just, I knew it would be painful, but there's something about like when it's actually happening and you're trying to like wake up all the time and nurse and like find a comfortable position to do that, but also like just everything, was hard. And it was just me and my partner here with the baby. He stayed from work for a couple of weeks with me. So it was just us. Yeah, I had hired a doula for labor, but there was nobody here after we got home.
Now, you said that you hired a labor doula. Did the labor doula accompany you during labor, or?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So that was interesting. My doula got there, I think maybe 2 minutes before I started pushing, and like then the baby came. It was very very quick. So yeah, I saw her, but I really didn't have my doula there during labor. I had her there for the actual birth. And then she like helped me get breakfast, and she handled my placenta encapsulation, and she did some things like that for me after. But yeah, I really didn't have her there during labor at all either.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I prior to the birth of my daughter, I was a birth and postpartum doula, and but most of my work involved the postpartum period, supporting mothers after birth. And a lot of what I realized was that, labor doulas were of course important in that aspect, but also as it relates to the postpartum period as well. And so, a lot of emotions tend to set in that you don't really realize that you have, until everything has happened, you've had your baby, and then those emotions set in, and you kind of wish, man, I wish I had a little bit more support. So it's awesome that you had the support of your partner. I'm so sorry that you didn't, have like postpartum support. And but yeah, I'm really glad that everything worked out really well for you. My other question is, well, this is in relation to the question I just asked, but did you experience any postpartum depression or anxiety or baby blues or anything like that?
um I did. I feel like what I expected to go through didn't really set in until I was probably 3 or 4 months postpartum. But initially, like, it's so hard to say because I've always had like anxiety and depression issues. But when you think about like you have a baby and there's nobody around to help you, and there's a pandemic, so you're like, you just got out of the hospital and there's all that worry, and then like just the regular I just had a baby stuff going on. It's hard now for me to say like I think I did have some issues with that, but it just didn't get severe until a few months later. And I think a lot of what I experienced was pretty standard.
Just to kind of go back to what you said, so yeah, you were so it didn't quite set in until that like 3-month period. So in addition to all the other emotions that you were going through, you were also in pain, from the labor and everything. So that could definitely play a role in that, in the baby blues and like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and things like that.
I think I was in denial a lot of the time about like, because it was like I was happy to have my baby, and all I could think was like, I should just be grateful that like I have my partner here. I should just be grateful that like I got to have him while I was in labor and he didn't have to be outside the room. There were things like that where I was like, I should just be grateful for what I have. But of course later it was like more clear it really sucked, and there was a lot that really was not, it was depressing. Like there was a lot of stuff that I was genuinely anxious about, but I was like trying to talk myself out of being anxious and like, oh no, I'm really okay. Things are really fine. I really have a lot to be thankful for, and it's like kind of a balance. I don't know.
Right. Well, and you know what? And what you said resonates with me because I went through a similar period, but just to kind of, it sounded like you were like affirming yourself, like you were trying to, you used the word denial, but it also sounded like you were trying to affirm yourself in a really tough situation. But I think a lot of something that a lot of mothers go through is they're like, you know what, I should just be grateful that my baby's healthy, and but it's okay to be grateful for what you have and everything. But the negative feelings, I don't even want to call them negative, but the feelings that you're having that don't make you feel good in that moment, those are also valid. And it's very important um, to be honest with ourselves, like about that, like this really sucks right now. Like it's okay to admit that. That doesn't make you a bad mom. Um, and what you said, it resonates with me because I went through a similar thing. I'm like, I don't want to complain. I just want to, but I think doing that could also like, um, I don't want to say send us into a downward spiral, but it could put off feelings that we really do just have to sort of address. But I'm really glad that, you were able to like, well, I don't want to speak for you, but were you able to like overcome? Like, were you able to get to a better place?
I think things stabilized in a way. I did have a therapist that I was working with.
Awesome.
So I was grateful to her. And the thing that I think helped was like that placenta encapsulation. I don't know for sure, but that's why I did it, because I had heard enough people say like I did it with my second but not my first, or something like that. And like, it seemed like my mood was a little better. So I don't know, I think that helped a little bit too. But yeah, I think turned out okay. We definitely got through it, and started sleeping more regularly, and like breastfeeding went okay. So like I feel like I did get through it in a way that was like, in the long run, like it worked out.
Awesome. I'm so happy for you, Liz. That's
Thank
really
you.
good to hear. Um, my next question is, what would you do the same and what would you do differently about your experience?
Yeah. So even though I would, I now know like I might have to go to the hospital if I do it again, but I would still plan to do a home birth again. I would work with the same people. You know, I would definitely work with a doula. And I think, you know, just being mentally prepared, I think it would be easy the second time to just kind of skate through like, oh, I already know kind of how this is. But I think being really, really focused on like preparing for a natural birth at home helped me get through all of the stuff that got complicated and having to go through the hospital. So like I would take the time to like still go through like preparing all that kind of like mindset and like mindfulness, things like that, practicing those things. But like differently, I really do. I wish I could have had someone like you. I wish I could have had you to work with after. But I would work with somebody postpartum, even if it's just like a mommy's helper or something. I think that having like a postpartum doula would have been really, really helpful. And I would have communicated more clearly, I think, with my partner, and have a more like tangible, like literally written down, very clear, easy to understand, like my wishes or like plan or whatever to take with me. Because part of what happened with my doula was like my partner was like not aware that she should be contacted at a certain point. She was thinking it would take longer for me to labor than it did, and the nurses didn't even know that I had a doula. Meanwhile, I was lost in space trying to get through this like, labor. So nobody called her until it was like, almost too late. So I would definitely do a better job of communicating with everybody instead of just assuming, I guess, that like I would have the wherewithal to do all those things or communicate the stuff, my expectations, things like that.
Thank you for sharing that, Liz. And yeah, just and I know that you said that you wish that you had written a lot of things down, but and it's important to do that, but if it provides you any comfort, there are some situations in which people do write things down, like they have a birth plan, and sometimes things still go, awry or not according to plan. But it's, it's still good and important to try to plan as much as we can. But you actually mentioned, that you would plan for a home birth again. And speaking of which, you wrote a very informative article on home birth preparation. So we'll go ahead and link that as well. My final question to you, Liz, is what advice do you have for women like you who planned for a home birth but ended up with a hospital birth?
A couple things. I would say, kind of like you mentioned, like be present, and it's okay, like allow yourself to feel disappointed and, scared and angry or whatever you're feeling. Like you don't have to try to talk yourself out of feeling those things, because I think having that awareness of how you feel and what's going on is like important to process it. And then then once you're able to, I feel like, go through and just accept it, then you can move into like trusting. That would be my second thing, is like just trust the process, like trust what's happening. And even though it feels like now you've lost control, or like you have no control over what's happening and everything is really scary and overwhelming, like it's still you and the baby. Like you're gonna do this and you're going to get through it, and your body knows what to do. So even if there's a little bit of help that you need, don't give up on, yourself and the natural process that's happening. And I would say too, like, stay talking to your baby, because even if you don't talk out loud, like they know what's going on. And, I don't know. I did that. And I feel like that was just the whole time I was just like, we're going to get through this. I'm here with you. We're doing this, And I don't know. I feel like that. I don't know. I think it worked. So, yeah.
No, that put a huge smile on my face, because it's bringing back pleasant memories of me having so many conversations with my baby. But like you said, talking to your baby, even if you aren't doing it out loud, they feel you. They're a part of you, so they know, what you're feeling. I'd like to say even what you're thinking. But it's beautiful to me that, in the midst of everything that was going on, and even though it didn't go according to plan, you were still practicing that mindfulness and communicating with your baby, letting your baby know that everything was going to turn out okay. And that's another beautiful thing about the process is that you can literally, speak things into existence. That's why it's so important to like affirm ourselves. So I'm so glad that everything turned out so well for you, Liz. And I really appreciate you being here with us and sharing your birth story. And you're welcome. And I want to thank our viewers as well. Thank you to our natural pregnancy and birth viewers. And feel free to visit our website. We have lots of information on pregnancy, labor, and the postpartum recovery period. So we will see you next time.